When you pass away, they say, Ilanga, lishonile.
Our belief is AmaZulu that the king never dies.
Majesty, our King, has transitioned to higher service. May God give us wisdom to grieve as people with hope.
I'd say there was a deep sense of loss. A few weeks before, there were constant rumors that he is in hospital, that he's not well, and on several occasions the family had to come out and say, no, the king is fine. Yes, it was a shock in the sense that it didn't seem like him catching COVID-19 would ultimately lead to him passing away.
He goes now to his ancestors and joins the line of kings. Wena wendlu bayede laluphumule sithula isikandaba laluphumule impande kaZulu bejani liphuma esiqhiwini kade balivalele hlanga lomhlabathi bayede.
Sinokudabuka kakhulu ngenkosi yethu ngoba besiyithanda kakhulu.
The way we respect him, actually he's our member of the club, though he is the king. He's also a Buto member, motorcycle club. So that's why we came as many as we can.
He had connections everywhere, India, everywhere. He had that connection. So for me, I think it's that unity factor that he has always had, and he has always been welcoming.
We pray that we can be able to teach the young one about isiko lethu lomkhosi womhlanga, because sikubonile ukubaleka kwalo ukuthina ukuthi umkhosi womhlanga uyini.
Ubayede uyisibani sengane zethu, ubayede ubesiphathele isizwe sethu enganeni zethu, ubeyikho konke kithi.
The entire nation was very much attached to the Zulu monarchy, and he was leading all the ceremonies. It affected them badly.
He's the longest serving monarch. He was actually due to celebrate his 50-year jubilee in 2021 when he passed away.
God granted him longevity and we reaped the rewards. He carried his burden with dignity.
I'd say many Zulus felt that we'd lost an institution, a voice of reason.
He is the custodian of Zulu culture, traditions, customs, both living and tangible heritage, as well as the language of AmaZulu, which is isiZulu. When the king passed on, firstly, it's not something that is announced immediately, because in the past there were wars and there were enemies. So it was something that was kept a secret, and when everything was prepared, then the nation would be informed so that the Amakosi and people will flock to the palace to pay their respect.
The royal family understands the discontent about not being able to give their king a fitting send-off, but the mourning period can't be allowed to become a super spreader event.
I know that there are many subjects of the king who are not happy, so measures have been put in place to avert this. Mina njengoNdunankulu wesizwe ngithi kufanele nihlakazeke manje. Kuhlakazekani.
It was unfortunate that, the family had to say, well, actually, please don't descend upon this palace. We are trying to maintain the COVID-19 protocols as much as possible.
Just after the king esechaliwe, then the mourning period began. But it was shorter because the king left an instruction that it must not take longer. In the past, when the king passes on, people will not go to the fields and plant and do whatever that touching the soil, because that's where the king was supposed to be buried or achalwe. So soil was very much important that no one touches it.
It's a very private ceremony that has to take place in the early hours of the morning, and only very few people are also, even from within the family, are a part of that ceremony, and that's when certain rituals are done. We don't know what exactly gets done, but you also have to do it before the sun rises again. And, the place at which the king is interred is very secret. AmaButho are the warriors of the Zulu nation. They're the blanket of the king. So everywhere the king goes, you'll find AmaButho.
Because AmaButho, they are ingubo yobukhosi. They always accompany the king wherever he goes, as well as Inyosi. The Inyosi will recite izibongo zenkosi.
They would be the ones also who would be taking charge and would be front and center when it comes to the interring of the remains of the late king. On the day of the late king's remains being fetched, it was chaotic. But when we get to Nongoma town, it is a buzz. It is packed. At this point, because the family now is already inside the mortuary, there isn't anybody who's necessarily communicating what's going on. You have the Zulu maidens, you have AmaButho, then you just have the general public just surrounding the area. At some stage, I think one of my colleagues must have walked 2 kilometers on air following AmaButho with their camera handheld until they got to us, and because it was like a relay. The likelihood of the weather changing, especially when you're fetching a king, that it's likely to rain, but that's a sign, that's a blessing, that the ancestors are welcoming then the spirit of the late king. The cortege started initially it was moving slowly, but because of time, because we were told that the sun cannot set with the remains of the late king having not arrived at the palace.
The reason why the king is buried in the early hours is because it is our belief as AmaZulu that the king never dies, so that when the sun rises, he is also up to look after the nation.
Just before entering the palace, there is a bit of a stretch of road. And when we got there, we also had to stop so that certain, practices can be observed, such as having a member of the family declare to, because you are speaking to his spirit, by the way, when you're leaving the cemetery and you're explaining what is happening. So there was a stage at which we stopped now where they're saying we're now at the gates of your palace. This is where your remains are going to be until you're interred, as now the hearse flanked by amabutho slowly then made its way into Gwaketho Mthandao.
That rain, unomkhubulwane, which symbolizes that everything is going well. If there's a ceremony that is taking place, the rain shows that everything is going well or it went well.
We're all looking out to see which son would not be at the funeral.
Whoever is leading the nation must not come near a darkness, that shade.
The belief is that you can't have the energy of death around you, because as the king, you are the life of the entire nation. But then we got caught out as the media because Prince Misuzulu at the time, he was there, but remember, there was no coffin, so there were no remains, so actually he could be there. In the background, there was now beginning to be that simmering discussion about what was going to happen. You know, it was like, what now?
Today, in the presence of more than 200 members of the royal family, His Majesty King kaZwelithini's will was read by his lawyers. And in line with the wishes of His Majesty the King, the family would like to announce that Her Majesty Queen Mantfombi Zulu will act as regent of the Zulu nation during the interregnum.
I think the logic there was because she's the great wife. And, you know, and this is some of the criticism that some have lodged against the late king, to say that the reason why also there was so much instability is because he just did not name somebody in his will. But those who are close to the king will tell you that there's a reason why he didn't do that, because there was the prospect of whoever is named as a successor, that their life would be in danger. So already by the time the will was being read out, and I mean, the will being read out and the estate being wound up are two different processes, right? So just the will in and of itself being read out, there were questions around legitimacy.
Following yesterday's memorial service for the late Regent, Her Majesty Queen Regent Mantfombi, the senior matriarch of the Zulu royal family, Queen Mavis Mazungu, gathered members of the family this morning to support one another and express sympathies.
One could have never anticipated that 3 or so odd weeks later, after the interment of the late king, that she too would pass away, leaving the AmaZulu nation in yet again another state of disarray. Yeah, that was devastating. So as in the sun has set again.
People are sad, they just received the news. It was very unexpected.
Things always have take a dramatic turn with this story.
You know, it felt like they're going to war.
Everything is moving at lightning speed, eh? That's when I started hearing banging of doors.
Wait. We forbid the media.
Chaos and pandemonium are unfolding here. Touch and go situation can tell you that at the moment I heard.
The late regent appears to have succumbed to COVID-19.
It's understood in a hospital in Johannesburg.
The unexpected passing of Her Majesty Queen Mantfombi Zulu.
None of us could have anticipated the passing away of the Queen Regent. You have the late king passing away. Now you have the Queen Regent passing away in the context of some within the family not really wanting her to be the one to be the regent until a successor has been found. And then some 3.5 weeks later, she too now passes away, and it just creates a sense of confusion, uncertainty. What is going to happen now? Just when we thought there was some sort of a transitional plan in place, that too was thrown into disarray. But I think what was more heartbreaking is that there was now a family that was orphaned within a short space of 3.5 weeks, without having been given enough space and room and time to mourn the passing away of your father. Now it's your mother.
Very good morning to you once again. Well, we have just witnessed the remains of the late regent of AmaZulu nation, that's Queen Mantfombi Zulu, departing for KwaNongoma today.
This is indeed a double blow for the Zulu nation. They've expressed how...
So I remember I was with Linda that day when we were sent to Hillbrow Mortuary, where we saw a lot of Amabuto waiting outside. Apparently, the body of the Queen was there. So Amabuto were just paying homage and also waiting for her to come out of the mortuary so they accompany her body to KZN.
This is a moment that's been described as never seen before. It's uncharted territory that the Zulu nation is without a leader in such a short space of time, passing of the king and then the regent.
We're a touch before the main gate of the Royal Palace.
When we talk about Queen Mantfombi, she was the regent queen. So she had that elevated status. Amabuto were there because she was the regent queen.
At 7 o'clock this Friday morning, the official provincial memorial service for the late regent Queen Mantfombi Zulu will be held this morning at the KwaNongoma Royal Palace in KwaNongoma. She was interred in a private ceremony in the early hours of this morning.
The dynamics of this funeral were completely different. These children, they now have to take leadership of processes, of rituals, and this is at a time when now we know for sure that there are divisions within the family. And there was a huge delegation that came from Eswatini.
She became the great queen because of the royal blood in Swaziland. There was this relationship that was formed when King kaZwelithini married Queen Mantfombi. The nation paid lobola for King kaZwelithini, and therefore they got married, and she was the princess that side, King Sopoza's daughter, and she became the queen this side.
We arrive at Kwakangela Makengana Royal Palace. It's quiet, but you can see that they're still in shock.
Again, we're asking ourselves, will Prince Misuzulu be in attendance? He was nowhere to be seen, and at the time we were told that he's in Swaziland because of now what seems to be, especially after the passing away of his mother, seemed to be a mounting speculation, let me say it, put it that way, that he is likely to be the successor to the throne.
I was working with my colleague, Senzo Mahlobo, and we brief each other. I'm going to be next to the marquee to capture government delegates coming in.
I was doing sort of, you know, the entrance of all the guests one by one. So I saw the sisters entering the marquee, but no one anticipated what was going to happen next. The program gets underway. Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi is there. Former President Jacob Zuma is there.
I sense something. You know what? Something is going to happen now. I hear a sound on my right.
And it was during one of the prayers, actually. It was just at the beginning of the service.
And I remember my colleague Uziyanda running towards me, pointing, go up, go up, go up. I could hear her, but I wasn't watching her because I remember I was live. Immediately, I got goosebumps because it felt like for a minute holding that shot, the singing, they were so in sync, the symbolism of the king being in the middle, you know, it felt like they're going to war.
They literally made a grand entrance. I've never seen anything like it. They barged into the gates.
And I think for me, to be honest, the event started right there.
Of course, him being flanked by Amabuto was the message to say, you're the king. If Amabuto are recognizing you, does this mean that you're the king? Because Amabuto, like I said, serve at the pleasure of the king.
Breaking news, the will is now going to be read today at 5.
There's Prince Misuzulu in that vehicle. He's now arrived at the Kwakangela Mankengane Palace, and of course the reading of that will cannot take place without him being present. You would have also seen Advocate Madonsela with his briefcase. He is the one who is carrying the will, and in fact he just said a short while ago that the reading of the will has not concluded, and in fact they are going to be changing venues from this particular palace, and he didn't quite divulge where exactly they're going.
Advocate Griffiths Madonsela just gave a bit of context. But when the will was signed, it was the 23rd of March. Of course, we all knew what we wanted to hear from this will, and here it goes.
The whole royal family is here. This is a God-given moment that we're all here. At this moment, then, I think the platform to Advocate Madonsela as to read the will of the late king.
Nina Benkosi, the task that befalls me weighs heavily. After the untimely demise of our king, Isilo Samabanda Onke, King kaZwelithini, the need to fill up the position of the fallen king has arisen. His Majesty the King, during his lifetime and through his last will and testament, bestowed upon me the singular honor to succeed him and to assume the role of the Zulu monarch.
In the middle of the reel being read, I could hear just beats and pieces of memory behind. But quickly it subsides.
I believe it to be appropriate and befitting of the great Zulu nation to bestow the honor given to me by His Majesty to my son, Umntwana Misizulu Zulu. I accordingly invite Your Excellencies to support my decision and identify Umntwana Misizulu Zulu as the person who should assume the position of the King of the Zulu nation. Yours faithfully.
And as I'm still looking down at my phone, there's Prince Thokozani standing up, and I see this exchange between Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi and Thokozani, and he's saying, "Hlala phansi, musukanga."
Musukanga wena. Musukanga. Hlala phansi. Musukanga wena. Hlala phansi. Hlala phansi.
I remember taking off my camera off the tripod right there and there because I realized that something is going to happen.
Ngokwencwadi le okhuluma ngayo ethulwa isina council uMadonsela yangomhla ka-23 March, effectively Indlovukazi abdicated the throne ngoba ngokwe-will ihlala ishilulu uma kuyilo kuyoba ulo nengonyama iyakusho lokho ukuthi mangena umntana enkosi kuyakuba ngubani. Ipoint lami ukuthi she abdicated the throne and therefore ubengasakwazi-ke ukuthi engaqoka omunye ngoba she had vacated the throne. In a nutshell, kufanele kuphume provincial government gazette kukhishwe i-certificate of recognition. Okwesithathu ku-informwe i-provincial house. Sifisa izo izinto lezo engavumela Indlovukazi ukuthi iyenze iwini. Okunye so ngokwami-ke noma bengacisha bendaba obangikhuluma bendaba.
While the drama was happening, the commotion was happening, I saw the king being whisked away.
I didn't even see Prince Misuzulu get out of his seat. All I remember was our producer coming to our camera saying, "He's gone."
You're running away, you're holding this shot. At the back of your mind, you're hoping that nothing happens. No one is going to get shot. You could see there's a guy who's wearing a white shirt.
Wait.
Switch that thing on.
It's only when we get to the main door of the house and now the convoy is already on standby.
I can tell you that guns have been called for at this stage. It was at that very moment that Prince Misuzulu shot up very quickly, and I mean,
everything is moving like at lightning speed, eh?
Now the running starts. Now we're following the convoy.
In my natural instinct, we decide, let's follow the cars. I mean, I think when you're on air and you're broadcasting, the natural thing to do is just to follow this car and see where it goes. And there I am running. And you know, I think it's important to reflect that. I think as broadcast journalists, like the relationship between the reporter and the cameraman is so important because no one told anybody. We just instinctively just started running after the car. Still live on air, I'm huffing and puffing. There goes the convoy.
drama is one word, pandemonium is another way I could describe what has unfolded here at the Kwakangela Mankengane Royal Palace. Touch and go situation can tell you that.
You can see the emotion on everybody's face that this could have become deadly. Once again, we're left with question marks about the future of the Zulu throne.
I am hopeful that umntwana Misuzulu will accept this honor and duty with buoyancy.
This is the dawn of a new era.
I believe that umntwana Misuzulu suitable to assume the position of the Zulu monarch.
I never knew I was going to be king.
The end of May now, so it's about 2.5, 3 weeks later. I get a call from one of the princes, one of the late king's brothers. We would like you to speak to the king. And he was one of those who was already at the time referring to Misuzulu as king. So he says, are you interested? I'm like, of course I'm interested. What is the dynamic? What is going to be permissible? You know, those are the nitty-gritty details that you sort of have to pin down before you plan a production. I think we left a couple of days after that phone call, about 2 days later. Get to KZN, and I was also hesitant because of how they were doing things. So they weren't being forthcoming with the venue for this interview. They weren't being forthcoming with the time. Then I thought, okay, maybe it's a security concern, okay? And when we get there, there's the vehicle that is very familiar to me, ZK, which is the vehicle only the Zulu King would be ferried in. We get to where the king is. So now we're running around, we're setting up, we are now waiting for our other colleagues more to bring us something for us to go live with. Then we get told, yeah, you won't talk about the late king, you won't talk about the will, you won't talk about this, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, that's my entire interview gone. I'm like, oh, whoa, this is very tough because those are all the questions that I want to ask, over and above wanting to get to know him. But I mean, we want to know what is going through his mind when the will is being read. We want to know that grand entrance, you know? And then they tell us that instead of the hour that you were promised, you're going to only have him for 15 minutes.
All right, Stephen Krotes, I've got you.
So you're right. All right.
We're taking it live.
Our senior political reporter, Ziyanda Ngobo, now in conversation with the new Zulu King Misizulu, kaZwelithini's. Ziyanda, good afternoon.
A very good afternoon to you, Stephen. Well, we're here in KwaMkhuze in KwaZulu-Natal, and as you've aptly put it, we are in conversation with King Misuzulu, kaZwelithini. I started off, obviously, with the stuff about him, who he is, what his vision is. Did you always know that you were going to be the king?
You know, coming from a polygamous background, you can never be sure of anything. To even try to even suspect that you might be king, or you might be senior prince, or you might be a senior in the family is very difficult because the family is very big. It consists out of 12 houses. of Zulu, which, you know, picking of a king is a very difficult process.
But you arrived at your mother's memorial flanked by AmaBoto. That sent a strong message, because it was in that moment then when there was a sense that you were actually announcing, I am the rightful person to sit on the throne.
On that day, arrival, it just happened automatically. I think the Zulus were already hungry for a king. They were hungry for a leader. If you remember, once again, all of this was happening. This was my mother's memorial.
Yes.
So even the warriors, while they were there, they felt the pain that I was going through. You know, having lost my father, now it's the Queen. And through that comfort and support, that's why what happened. I did not plan it.
Okay. I just got a sense that this is somebody who is still trying to grapple with the passing away of his parents. Firstly, the will is being read out publicly.
Yeah.
Was that a deliberate decision? Were you aware that the entire nation would be privy to the reading of your mother's will?
Just to mention, my father's one was done privately, and we said this one, let us do public, just to also send a message publicly so that everyone is on a clear picture on what's happening and what's going on. And I did not know that night that my name was going to be read on that will.
Princess Magate is the person who your aunts and uncles are putting forward as the rightful heir to the throne. How does that make you feel? Have you spoken to Prince Magate?
We have spoken a couple times since the death of my father, and also we spoke at the time of the death of the Queen. But I didn't know when we spoke that he would be a so-called contender. But for me personally, Mangcobo, just to answer a question that I think a lot of people are asking in their heads, I don't have a problem with the will. I respect his word, even when he's no longer with us. But everything, I don't believe the signatures are fake, but these are court matters.
Yes.
I don't like to go into detail with them, but just out of respect for the Zulu people, myself, the throne, and the rest of the family, I don't dispute anything my father has put on the table for the rest of the family insofar as the will.
What is happening in the AmaZulu royal household has an implication for the AmaZulu nation. How do you plan to deal with this?
I do believe that all of this will be over one day, and everybody will come back home, and we will sit down as a family. I believe it's a matter that the family needs to sit down and solve, because at the end of the day, we can't have two kings. We have to have one.
Bayete, thank you so much for your time. We hope that we'll have. And I think he was also somebody who was sort of saying to the AmaZulu nation, like, please give me time, like, just give me time and space just to adjust and like wrap my head around things. But I am willing to serve as your king. Argument really ultimately boiled down to civil law versus customary law, because at some stage the first wife's lawyers tried to adjust their initial application to say, well, actually we need to have the other 5 marriages of the late king declared null and void in order then for her to be able to say she's entitled to half of his estate. So 2022 comes, I still follow the developments of the royal household, where arguments are going to be made by the lawyers about primarily 2 things. It's the civil marriage that the king's first wife, Queen Misizulu, entered into in terms of a community of property. Then the second was going to deal with the validity and the legitimacy of the will.
The African Queen seeks a declaration that she is entitled to a 50% share of the joint estate.
And Judge Madondo is asking, you want us to deal with you being married to the king according to civil marriage. You are what they call umfazi wephepha. What then should be said about the other 5 wives?
Fortunately, the law is clear. The first wife is entitled to 50% of the joint estate. What becomes a bit of a problem is when you also have a look at the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act. It says that the husband and the wife that are in a customary marriage also jointly own the estate.
Then they tried to amend their application to say that they want the court to officially declare, because they didn't ask for a declaratory order, to declare the other wives' marriages, according to customary law, invalid. Which of course now means you are basically not recognizing your sister wives.
Court said, look, we do not necessarily have to deal with this issue. There is no life dispute between you as the first wife, and you even say it in your papers that your intention is not necessarily to challenge marriages that came after yours of the 5 other wives.
The judge also found that the application wasn't specific enough because the king's estate is split up in 5. There's some, part of it is Ingonyama Trust, some of it his cattle, and so his estate is split up differently. So the judge, I remember at the time asking, say, but also which part of the estate are you making, claim to? Because not all of it belonged to the king in his personal capacity. Some of it, he was the custodian on behalf of the royal family or the AmaZulu nation.
And when you have a look at the Marriages Act, it's community of property, 50-50. We know your 50% shouldn't be affected by what the will says. And if it does, maybe you will come, but we are not there yet.
The applicants in this application are the daughters of the late Isilo of Mtanda Royal Palace. They challenge the authenticity and validity of the will of the late Isilo on the grounds that the signatures appended thereto in various places are not that of the late Isilo.
The 2 daughters of Queen Sibongile Dlamini Zulu claiming that they believe that the will has been forged.
A handwriting expert, Mr. Yossi Vasoki, who has over 40 years experience within signature analysis.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget what he said after the analysis. He said the only consistency in this will is the inconsistency of my father's signatures.
Over and above, suspicions of the signature being forged, there is an issue about removal of an ID number, one of the beneficiaries. That was scratched out and it was replaced by a different number, and that amendment was not signed by 2 or more witnesses.
Even the first wife and her daughters, all in their affidavits, even in their oral hearings, continuously said that their applications have got no bearing or have got nothing to do with the succession to the throne. There was a bit of a back and forth to say, how can you say that? Because if you're questioning the validity of the will, then you're questioning Queen Mantfombi being placed as the regent, and then by implication her will appointing Misuzulu as the king, then there's a ripple effect there.
According to court, based on the information that it was given, the boxes were ticked in terms of customary law. They were not challenged, not by the first wife, not by the princesses, at least insofar as coronation is concerned. The only issue is the validity of the will. That's the only issue that court, said, yes, this one, I think let's deal with it. I'm going to give you, 15 days or so to launch a case in respect of this one.
However, even if at the end of the day, the will of the king would be declared as invalid, or that is not the true reflection of the intentions of the king, it has no bearing on the manner in which the King Misizulu would have been installed.
Because what Judge Mjabliseni Madondo was saying was that, well, this is a family matter. The family has made a determination, and if there was an issue with Misuzulu being the right heir to the throne, that is a separate court application altogether. That is not what I have been called.
And the result, the application is dismissed with costs, such costs to include the costs of 2 counsel, and this concludes the 3 applications.
So in other words, that judgment paved the way for the coronation, for all the other processes which have now subsequently taken place. Every time there was a court appearance, the king's siblings would be in attendance, and you could see them visibly exhilarated and relieved as well with the outcomes of that court judgment, because that also meant that the ball was now in President Cyril Ramaphosa's court to issue a certificate of recognition.
Essentially, there hasn't been many cases where wills have been successfully revoked, on the basis of signatures. I mean, you would have to advance a lot of evidence, perhaps even witnesses that were, part of the process. But, things might turn the other way also.
King Misizulu kaZwelithini has logged another victory after the High Court in Pietermaritzburg dismissed a fresh attempt to scupper his coronation.
Things always have take a dramatic turn with this story. I really need to emphasize that.
King's Magadi kaZwelithini. That's what it is.
We chose the name of Buzabas kaZwelithini.
Akusiwona lo kade bethi abanye awu ngabe nomhlangano ukubeka inkosi, cha inkosi ikhona.
AmaZulu know exactly that a king is not chosen, but a king is born.
So President Cyril Ramaphosa has wished Misuzulu a long and prosperous reign as the next AmaZulu king. And that's after he officially recognized him, saying Misuzulu's ascension to the throne is a moment of distinguished history for the Zulu nation.
Inkosi ethombele ehlathini, amanye amakhosi ethombele endlini, ekhipha inkomo zehla ngoholoko, ibhekwa mshanyelo, bayikwagija umkholo bani, ezala amafayeni, yobikela umzweni, umzweni kwamanzi ibheshu, esesasayiwa, blonda mngolhlakazi.
Family members who are inside the Enyogeni Royal Palace are going ahead with that particular ceremony, which is, of course, the entering of the crawl, despite, of course, having seen that statement from the Prime Minister of the AmaZulu nation.
Kube buhlungu kakhulu ukuhamba kwengonyama. Washiya nemibuzo eminingi. Ingonyama ivalelwe endaweni eyayivalelwe kuyo. Icindezelekile indlunkulu. Ayangakwazi ukuyikhombisa ukuhlakanipha kwayo phezu kwesizwe ngoba ipolitiki ifike yakuthatha konke. Akupheleni ukudideka kithi Zulu. Ke sibuyise ubungcwele kithi. Sikubuyise okuhle sahlonishwa ngakho umhlaba.
A very heartfelt, one might say, speech from Prince Magadi.
Can I correct the part of Princess Magadi? King's Magadi, kaZwelithini. That's what it is. Because the royal family has fulfilled all the responsibilities from the rituals till the last one that we did yesterday. So we have King's Magadi as the royal family.
However, being the eldest child does not mean that you are the heir to the throne, because there are customs, traditions, and there's indigenous knowledge that is known by AmaZulu.
We are here to clarify some of the things that has happened in the past weekend. We want to put the record straight that those rituals or anything that has happened was not done by people responsible to do such things.
Samsana asikimizi ngoba nalokho sakuzwa sekwenzekile.
So to take one of the king's son to the throne without their fathers, it doesn't give him blessing.
I just need to emphasize that these three are the most important members of the royal family.
That is why today we have given the name
of Buzabazi, kaZwelithini.
We've got reasons, because we look at all of them equally, and then we select, because he is the one that has been with the king, working very closely. He groomed him for more than 20 years. He knows everything. The aim is not to divide the Zulu nation, the Zulu royal family. Our aim is to bring us together, because the preferred one has to be agreed upon by the whole family. But as the ruling family, we have identified him.
AmaZulu know exactly that a king is not chosen, but a king is born.
Good morning to you. People are starting to stream into the venue, but security quite tight. People have traveled far and wide, but as the sun comes out and as the day really starts to break, we are going to let out our jackets, because today it's celebration.
I think only the Gogos and the Mkhulus will know or remember when, King kaZwelithini Zulu was coronated. Even with his coronation, it wasn't without drama.
So it's all systems go insofar as the traditional coronation of Misuzulu kaZwelithini. The King Misizulu kaZwelithini will be entering the kraal, and when he emerges, he will be wearing and covered and draped in that lion's skin, the lion that he hunted.
The king is introduced to the ancestors of the nation, informing them officially through rituals that his father, the late king, is no more. He is now taking the nation forward.
He emerges, and you can tell that something changed. The evidence of all of that was just the mood around.
Ngiphakamise futhi ngokukhulu ukuzithoba umkankosi Dlunkulu kaMafu. Ngiyathokoza mama wami, uwena wedwa omama bami okhona namhlanje. Ngizimisele njengengonyama kaZulu ukuhola isizwe sikaMageba, isizwe sikababa. Ngiyazi ukuthi ngokwazi kwenu ukuthi isimo saseNdlunkulu sinjani kulezi insuku. Sengike ngasho futhi kaningana ukuthi nibezwe ukuthi bathini, ngoba kumele sibezwe ukuthi bathini, kodwa ningabalaleli. Akusekho kubuye kushintshe manje. Isiphume siphumile, ayikwazi futhi ukuphuma zibe mbili noma zibe ntathu. Siphuma sibe sinye. Yabezithi nina bendlovu ngithokoza kakhulu uthando lwami enginalo esizweni sikababa. Ngithokoza kakhulu benilokhu nihamba nami kunzima kunjalo.
That was a very powerful speech from the king when he said he's waiting for his brothers, for everyone at home, because this is home. Everyone is welcomed and they all have their seats. So that was bringing hope to the nation.
Ultimately, when you look at this journey, I think some who really monitor the history of the Zulu nation closely, they have actually said that it's quite fortunate that, yes, these divisions have played out publicly, and yes, it hasn't been the smoothest ride. But if you look at how ascensions to the throne have taken place previously and historically, we should be grateful that no blood has been shed this time around.
Indeed, dust will settle and there will be unity in the royal family, which will also be transferred to the entire nation to be united and move forward.
You know, you have a responsibility to remain the custodian of our culture, of our heritage, and ultimately our identity.
Everyone knows amongst AmaZulu that a king is born. And the king is not for the royal family only. The king is for the entire nation.
Indeed, we are protected by the shield of our identity, for which our kings and ancestors proudly waged war. The Zulu nation is still here. We're walking through the valley of grief, yet still we stand.